The morning sunlight filtered through the worn cotton curtains, casting a warm glow across the small kitchen where Lynn prepared breakfast. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs into a bowl while the kettle whistled on the stove. At 43, Lynn's face carried laugh lines around her eyes, evidence of a life filled with simple joys rather than luxury. She glanced at the clock on the wall, 6:30 a.m. Her husband, Hai, would be leaving for another business trip soon. 15 years of marriage and his travel schedule had only gotten busier over time. Lynn didn't mind, though. She had her kindergarten students to keep her company, 20 little ones who filled her days with finger paintings and nursery rhymes. "Something smells wonderful," Hai said, entering the kitchen with his worn leather briefcase. Despite approaching 50, he maintained the same boyish smile that had captured Lynn's heart when they met at university. He was dressed simply, a button-down shirt and slacks that Lynn had ironed the night before. Lynn set a plate of eggs and steamed buns before him. "Eat before it gets cold. How long will you be gone this time?" Hai chewed thoughtfully. 4 days, maybe 5. Just some meetings in Hong Kong and Singapore. He never elaborated much on his work, and Lynn never pressed. When they'd married, he'd been starting a small import business. Now he mentioned investments and partnerships, but the details remained vague. "I left your vitamins by your toothbrush," Lynn said, pouring tea into his travel mug. "Don't forget them this time." Their modest apartment in the suburbs of Shanghai wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms, one that doubled as Lynn's crafting space where she made materials for her classroom. The furniture was practical, much of it purchased during their first years, together. Only the television in the living room was new, a gift from Hai last spring festival. "I wish you'd let me hire someone to help around the house," Hai mentioned, not for the first time. "With your teaching schedule." "And who would I talk to all day?" Lynn interrupted with a smile. "The house isn't that big. I manage fine." After breakfast, Lynn walked Hai to the door as she did every morning. Their goodbye ritual never varied, a tight hug, a gentle kiss, and his promise to call when he landed. Through the window, Lynn watched him walk to the bus stop at the corner. He'd refused her suggestion to buy a car years ago, insisting the bus was perfectly good transportation. Once Hai disappeared from view, Lynn gathered her teaching materials and headed to Little Sunflower Kindergarten, a 10-minute walk from their apartment. The school wasn't fancy, but it was well-maintained, serving families from their working-class neighborhood. "Teacher Lynn!" squealed little May as Lynn entered the colorful classroom. The 5-year-old wrapped herself around Lynn's legs. "I lost another tooth." "Let me see," Lynn said, kneeling down to admire the gap in May's smile. "The tooth fairy will be very busy tonight." Lynn's day passed in a blur of alphabet songs, counting games, and mediating who got to play with the popular red truck during free time. Her fellow teachers often marveled at her patience. "How do you stay so calm when Bao, through paint again?" asked her younger colleague during lunch break. Lynn shrugged. "Children need to explore. A little mess is worth the smile when they create something beautiful." During arts and crafts, Lynn's phone buzzed with a message from Hai. "Landed safely. Hotel nice, missing your dumplings already." She smiled, typing back, "The plants are watered. Mrs. Zhang from next door asked about your mother's health again." This was their life, simple exchanges, small kindnesses, and a love that didn't need extravagance to feel complete. In the teacher's lounge, conversation turned to vacation dreams. "If I had money, I'd go to Paris," sighed Teacher Wang, flipping through a travel magazine. "The fashion, the food." "What about you, Lynn?" asked another teacher. "If your husband's business finally struck gold, where would you go?" Lynn thought for a moment. "Paris would be lovely, but honestly, I'd be happy with a weekend in a quiet place where Hai doesn't need to check his phone for work calls." The other teachers exchanged knowing glances. Lynn's contentment with her modest life was both admirable and perplexing to them. That evening, Lynn prepared lessons for the next day at her small desk. The apartment felt different when Hai was away, quieter, slightly emptier. She opened their budget notebook, carefully recording the day's expenses. Hai always transferred money into their joint account. enough to cover bills with a little extra for savings. She'd never asked how much he earned. It seemed impolite somehow, as if questioning his ability to provide. The phone rang, interrupting her calculations. "Teacher Lin? This is Mr. Chen, Bao's father," said a deep voice. "I wanted to thank you for helping him with his speech. The therapist says he's improving faster than expected." "He's a bright boy," Lin replied. "He just needs a little extra patience." After the call, Lin made a simple dinner, leftover rice with vegetables and a single egg. She ate while watching the evening news, her thoughts drifting to Hai. Was he eating well? Hotel food could be so unhealthy. She didn't know that at that very moment Hai was sitting in a sleek conference room on the 47th floor of a Hong Kong skyscraper, closing a $300 million deal. Around him sat board members in expensive suits, while financial analysts presented projections on massive screens. "Mr. Zhao, shall we proceed with the acquisition of the European shipping line?" asked a senior executive. Hai nodded, signing the documents with the same pen Lin had given him for their 5th anniversary, a simple ballpoint she'd saved up to buy, not knowing her husband could purchase the entire pen factory without blinking. Back. In their apartment, Lin prepared for bed, laying out her teaching clothes for morning. The bedroom was small but cozy, with photos of their life together lining the walls. Their university graduation, their small wedding, vacation snapshots from local tourist spots. Nothing hinted at wealth or excess. Lin's phone chimed with Hai's nightly call. "How was your day, my flower?" he asked, his voice warm despite the distance. "Peaceful. May lost another tooth. The principal wants me to lead the Spring Festival program again." Lin snuggled under the blanket. "How are your meetings?" "Just business," Hai replied vaguely. "Papers to sign, people to convince." "You sound tired?" "A little." "Tell me about your plans for the Spring Festival program." Lin described her ideas for the children's performances while Hai listened attentively, never interrupting to mention he'd just authorized the purchase of his 4th international airport. After they hung up, Lin set her alarm and turned out the light. In the darkness, she thought about their upcoming anniversary. 15 years together, and still, her husband listened to her kindergarten stories as if they were fascinating business proposals. What Lin didn't know was that Hai had been watching her from afar for years. Not in a creepy way, but through the careful reports of his most trusted assistant. He knew when she stayed late to help struggling students. He knew she used her own money to buy extra supplies for children whose families couldn't afford them. He knew she still walked to the market every Saturday to find the freshest vegetables, haggling playfully with vendors who'd known her for years. He'd kept his growing empire separate from their marriage for many reasons: fear of changing their relationship, worry about her safety if his wealth became known, and most importantly, his desire to be loved for himself rather than his money. In Hong Kong, Hai finished another late meeting, declining his executive's invitation to celebrate at an exclusive club. Instead, he returned to his hotel suite and opened his laptop to a file labeled Anniversary Plans. For 15 years, Lin had loved a man she thought was a modestly successful businessman. She had no idea that her husband controlled a conglomerate, spanning 3 continents, that his net worth had 9 zeros, or that the financial magazines called him the ghost billionaire for his ability to remain practically invisible while amassing extraordinary wealth. Hai studied flight schedules on his screen, finalizing details for a surprise he'd been planning for months. After 15 years, he was finally ready to share his truth with Lin. He only hoped their love was strong enough to withstand it. In Shanghai, Lin dreamed of Paris, never imagining that in 2 weeks' time, she would be standing in that very city, facing a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about her simple life and the man with whom she shared it. Lin hummed softly as she watered the small potted plants on their apartment balcony. The morning air carried the scent of her neighbor's cooking and the distant sounds of traffic. 2 weeks had passed since Hai's trip to Hong Kong, and he'd been unusually busy since returning, taking more calls in the other room, staying up late with his laptop. She didn't pry, though sometimes she wondered what kept him so preoccupied. Today was their 15th anniversary. Lin had prepared a special dinner for tonight, Hai's favorite dishes that she'd spent hours perfecting. She'd even splurged on a bottle of wine that cost more than she usually allowed herself to spend. The doorbell rang, pulling Lynn from her thoughts. Wiping her hands on her apron, she hurried to answer it. A young woman in a crisp suit stood outside, holding an envelope. "Mrs. Zhao?" she asked with a professional smile. "Yes, that's me," Lynn replied, trying to place the woman's face. "I'm Ming, Mr. Zhao's assistant. He asked me to deliver this to you personally." She handed over a cream-colored envelope. Lynn blinked in surprise. Hai has an assistant? As far as she knew, her husband worked alone, or with a small team of business partners. Ming's expression flickered momentarily. "For this particular project, yes. Please, the envelope contains important information. Mr. Zhao said it's urgent you review it today." After Ming departed with a polite nod, Lynn sat at their small kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside were a passport, an airline ticket, and a handwritten note in Hai's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Lynn, happy anniversary. For 15 years you have filled my life with joy beyond measure. It's time I shared something special with you. Pack for a week in Paris. Your dream city awaits. I have an unavoidable meeting, but will join you there tomorrow. All arrangements have been made. A car will pick you up at 4 p.m. today for your midnight flight. With all my love, Hai." Lynn read the note 3 times, her hands trembling slightly. Paris? Tonight? It seemed impossible, yet the ticket in her hand was real. Economy class on. The midnight flight to Paris. She rushed to call Hai, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi, I got your surprise. Paris? Are you serious? I don't even have a suitcase big enough for a week. Call me back, please." Lynn paced the apartment, mind racing. She'd need to call the kindergarten, arrange for a substitute teacher. What about her plants? Mrs. Zhang next door could water them. But Paris? How could Hai afford such a trip? Their savings had always been modest. They lived comfortably, but international vacations had never been in their budget. Lynn had mentioned Paris as a dream destination years ago, never expecting to actually go there. By early afternoon, with no return call from Hai, Lynn began packing with nervous energy. She pulled out her best clothes, not many, and certainly nothing fancy enough for Paris, but they would have to do. She folded each item carefully, trying to imagine herself walking along the Seine or standing beneath the Eiffel Tower. Mrs. Zhang came over to get instructions about the plants and mail. "Paris, how wonderful. Your husband must be doing very well these days," she said with a meaningful wink. "It's just for our anniversary," Lynn explained, uncomfortable with the implication. "We've been saving for a long time." At precisely 4 p.m., another surprise arrived. Not the taxi Lynn expected, but a sleek black car with a uniformed driver. "Mrs. Zhao?" "I'm here to take you to the airport," the driver said, taking her modest suitcase. "There must be some mistake. I'm just going to take a taxi," Lynn protested. "No mistake, ma'am. Mr. Zhao arranged everything. Please." The car's interior was luxurious, with soft leather seats and bottles of water in a small cooler. Lynn sat stiffly, feeling out of place. Through the window, she watched her neighborhood fade away as they headed toward Shanghai International Airport. "Have you worked with my husband long?" Lynn asked the driver, hoping for some explanation. "I was hired just for today, ma'am," he replied politely. "But Mr. Zhao's instructions were very specific about making sure you're comfortable." At the airport, the driver escorted Lynn inside, pointing her toward the economy check-in counters, before departing with a respectful bow. The terminal bustled with travelers, many dressed in business attire or expensive casual wear that made Lynn's simple outfit feel inadequate. She joined the long economy line, watching enviously as first-class passengers breezed through their exclusive check-in area. A family ahead of her argued loudly about overweight luggage, while behind her, a group of tourists compared travel guides. The wait gave Lynn time to think. In 15 years of marriage, Hai had never done anything this extravagant. His business trips had become more frequent over the years, but he always returned the same humble, loving man. He wore the same few shirts until they frayed at the cuffs. He took the bus, He counted their change from the market. How had he suddenly afforded Paris? After an hour in line, the announcement came over the loudspeaker. Attention passengers on flight CA934 to Paris. The flight has been delayed by 2 hours due to technical issues. We apologize for the inconvenience. Groans rippled through the line. Lynn glanced at her watch. It was already 7 p.m., and the flight wouldn't leave until 2 a.m. now. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, too nervous about the trip to think about food. Looking around, she noticed the first-class counter was empty. Perhaps they could answer a question about her connection in Paris without her waiting in the customer service line, which had grown impossibly long after the delay announcement. Lynn approached the counter hesitantly. The young woman behind it was tapping on her phone, looking bored. "Excuse me," Lynn said politely. "I know I'm not a first-class passenger, but I have a question about my connection in Paris. The economy line is very long, and since you're not busy..." The attendant, whose nameplate read Chien, looked up with immediate disdain. Her eyes swept over Lynn's simple clothes and economy ticket, before her lips curled slightly. "First-class services are for first-class passengers only," she announced, loudly enough that several nearby travelers turned to look. "Please return to the appropriate line." Lynn's face burned with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I just thought..." "You thought wrong," Chen interrupted. "The economy service desk is that way." She pointed dismissively before returning to her phone. Heart pounding, Lynn retreated, aware of the stares following her. She'd never felt so small, so out of place. Perhaps this whole trip was a mistake. She didn't belong in Paris any more than she belonged in the first-class line. What Lynn couldn't know was that 17 floors above the terminal, in an office with wall-to-wall windows overlooking the runways, her husband was watching the entire exchange on a security monitor. Haizhao sat behind an imposing desk. His normally warm eyes hardened as he watched his wife of 15 years being humiliated by his own employee. Beside him, his chief of operations shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, about the Paris arrangements," the man began. Hai raised a hand, silencing him. "Find out who that check-in agent is. Immediately." "Yes, Mr. Zhao." The man hurried from the office. Hai turned back to the monitor, watching Lynn make her way to a bench where she sat with her small suitcase, looking lost. For 15 years, he had kept his growing empire separate from their marriage, building a fortune while maintaining the fiction of modest success. The Shanghai International Airport had been his latest acquisition, part of a transportation network that spanned 3 continents. The plan had been perfect: send Lynn to Paris first class, join her the next day, and finally reveal the truth about their wealth in the most romantic city in the world. But his assistant had misunderstood, booking Lynn in economy to maintain the charade until Paris. Now, watching his wife sit alone in the crowded terminal, treated poorly by his own staff, Hai realized his carefully constructed plan was crumbling. More importantly, he saw the consequences of his deception reflected in Lynn's downcast eyes. He picked up the phone. "Ming, change of plans." 10 minutes later, as Lynn contemplated finding dinner at one of the overpriced airport restaurants, an entourage of airline staff approached her. Leading them was an older man in an impeccable suit, looking deeply concerned. "Mrs. Zhao?" he asked, bowing slightly. "I am the director of customer relations for the airline. We've had a terrible misunderstanding. Please, allow us to escort you to our premium lounge while we sort out your travel arrangements." Lynn stared in confusion. "There must be some mistake. I have an economy ticket." "No mistake, Mrs. Zhao. We have special instructions regarding your journey to Paris, if you'll please come with us." Bewildered, Lynn followed the group, unaware that the first steps of her journey were about to reveal the truth her husband had hidden for 15 years, a truth that would forever change the simple life she had known and loved. Lynn stood frozen as the airline staff led her through the terminal, past curious onlookers and through doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Her mind raced with questions. Had there been a mistake? Was something wrong with her ticket? Had Hai arranged something special without telling her? "Please, Mrs. Zhao." "This way," said the older man, who had introduced himself as Director Wu. His manner was respectful, almost nervous, as he guided her into an elevator that required a keycard to operate. "I don't understand what's happening," Lynn said, clutching her small handbag tighter. "My husband only gave me an economy ticket. If there's been a mistake—" "There has indeed been a mistake, Mrs. Zhao," Director Wu said as the elevator climbed smoothly. "But not the kind you're thinking of. Everything will be explained shortly." The elevator doors opened to reveal a lounge unlike anything Lynn had ever seen. Plush carpets stretched across a vast room with panoramic windows overlooking the runways. Well-dressed travelers sat in leather chairs, enjoying what looked like restaurant-quality meals. A grand piano played softly in one corner. "This is the chairman's lounge," Director Wu explained, leading her forward. "It's normally reserved for our most elite travelers and special guests of the airline's ownership." Lynn followed in bewilderment. "But I don't belong here. My ticket—" "Your accommodations have been upgraded, Mrs. Zhao. Significantly upgraded." He gestured to a private seating area set apart from the main lounge. "Please make yourself comfortable. Refreshments will be brought immediately, and someone will be with you soon to explain everything." Before Lynn could protest further, Director Wu bowed deeply, more deeply than seemed appropriate for an economy passenger who had been rudely treated by a check-in agent, and retreated. Almost immediately, a server appeared with a tray of delicacies, and tea served in what appeared to be genuine porcelain. Lynn perched uncertainly on the edge of a leather chair, afraid to fully settle into its softness. The lounge's other occupants, business people in expensive suits, celebrities trying to remain inconspicuous behind sunglasses, occasionally glanced her way with curiosity. In her simple traveling clothes, Lynn felt painfully out of place. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Hai. "Everything going smoothly? Boarding soon?" Lynn typed back quickly. "Something strange is happening. They took me to a fancy lounge. Did you arrange this?" She waited for a response, but none came. The server returned with more tea, addressing her as Mrs. Zhao with the same nervous deference that Director Wu had shown. Across the airport, 17 floors up, Hai paced his office. The confrontation at the check-in counter had forced his hand. His carefully orchestrated revelation, planned for a romantic dinner in Paris, was now unraveling in the sterile environment of an airport lounge. "Sir, we've identified the check-in agent," said Ming, entering with a tablet. "Chen Li, new hire, 3 months with the company." Hai glanced at the employee profile, then handed back the tablet. "Transfer her to baggage handling, effective immediately." "Yes, Mr. Zhao." "And Mrs. Zhao is now in the chairman's lounge as requested. The private jet is being prepared. Will you be joining her for the flight to Paris?" Hai paused by the window, watching a plane take off into the night sky. For 15 years he had maintained 2 separate lives. The simple existence he shared with Lynn and the high-powered world of international business, where he was known as one of Asia's most influential billionaires. He had convinced himself he was protecting Lynn, keeping her safe from the pitfalls of sudden wealth, preserving the authentic relationship they'd built as university students. But watching her being dismissed by his own employee had shattered that illusion. He wasn't protecting her. He was deceiving her. And now she sat confused and uncomfortable in a luxury lounge, her world beginning to tilt on its axis. "No," he decided finally. "Stick with the original plan. She flies to Paris tonight. I'll follow tomorrow with the documents as planned. But Ming," he turned to face his assistant, "she flies first class, not on the private jet. Let's not overwhelm her all at once." Back in the lounge, Lynn had been joined by a woman who introduced herself as Passenger Relations Manager Yong. She spoke with practiced smoothness as she explained that Lynn had been randomly selected for a service upgrade. "It's a customer appreciation program," Manager Yong said, smiling. "Occasionally we select passengers to experience our premium services. You're very fortunate, Mrs. Zhao." Lynn nodded, though she didn't believe a word of it. "And that's why the other staff are treating me like I'm someone important? Because of a random selection?" Manager Yong's smile flickered briefly. "We value all our passengers, Mrs. Zhao." "The check-in agent didn't seem to value me when I asked a simple question," Lynn remarked, surprising herself with her boldness. That was, unfortunate. Please accept our deepest apologies for that incident. I can assure you it does not reflect our standard of service. Manager Yong's tone became more genuine. The staff member in question is being addressed. Lin sipped her tea, wondering what being addressed meant. Probably nothing. People like her, ordinary people, didn't matter enough for companies to take action when they were treated poorly. Your flight will begin boarding in 1 hour, Manager Yong continued. You've been upgraded to first class, and a staff member will escort you directly to the gate when it's time. First class? Lin nearly spilled her tea. There must be some mistake. My husband only bought an economy ticket. No mistake, Mrs. Zhao. It's all been arranged. After Manager Yong left, Lin tried calling Hai again, but still got no answer. This wasn't like him. He always answered her calls, or at least responded to messages quickly. Something strange was happening, and it had started with his surprise anniversary gift of Paris. An hour later, a young staff member arrived to escort Lin to her flight. As they walked through the terminal, Lin noticed people stepping aside, security officers nodding respectfully. It was as if she were suddenly visible in a way she had never been before. At the gate, Lin was guided past the line directly to the boarding entrance. Mrs. Zhao, welcome aboard, said the chief flight attendant, bowing slightly. It's an honor to have you with us tonight. The first-class cabin was a revelation. Only 12 seats occupied the spacious area, each one a private pod with more buttons and features than Lin's entire kitchen at home. The flight attendant showed her how to recline her seat into a flat bed, how to use the entertainment system, where to find the amenity kit containing skincare products that cost more than Lin's monthly cosmetics budget. Would you like champagne? Before takeoff, Mrs. Zhao, the attendant asked. Just water, please, Lin replied, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I'm just a kindergarten teacher from Shanghai. I'm not anyone special. The flight attendant smiled warmly. On this flight, Mrs. Zhao, you are our most special guest. Those are our instructions. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Lin gazed out her window at the glittering lights of Shanghai. In 15 years of marriage, Hai had never surprised her like this. They had been happy in their simple life, or so she had thought. Now she wasn't sure what to think. In the seat pocket before her, Lin found an envelope with her name handwritten on it. Inside was a note in Hai's familiar handwriting. My dear Lin, by now you must have many questions. Tomorrow in Paris, you'll have your answers. For tonight, please enjoy this small luxury. You deserve this and so much more. With all my love, Hai. Small luxury? A first-class seat that probably cost more than their rent? Lin carefully folded the note and placed it back, in the envelope. The plane began to move, taxiing toward the runway. As it gained speed and lifted into the night sky, Lin felt something shift inside her as well. A rising sensation that the life she had known was falling away beneath her, just as the city lights were now receding below. Somewhere in the vast terminal they had just left, Chen Li, the check-in agent who had dismissed Lin so rudely, was being escorted to the Human Resources Department, unaware that her casual unkindness had been observed by the very man whose name was on her paycheck, the elusive billionaire who owned not just the airline, but the entire airport itself, and, in his office high above it all, Haijia watched his wife's plane climb into the night sky, knowing that by this time tomorrow, the simple life they had shared for 15 years would exist only in memory. He only hoped that the love they had built within that simple life would survive what came next. Lin woke to the gentle touch of a flight attendant on her shoulder. Mrs. Zhao, we'll be landing in Paris in 30 minutes. Would you like some breakfast? Disoriented, Lin sat up in her fully reclined seat. She had actually slept, wrapped in the softest blanket she'd ever felt, her head on a pillow that seemed to be filled with clouds. The cabin was quiet, dawn light filtering through windows where other passengers had already raised their blinds. Yes, thank you, she replied, still not used to the deferential way the crew treated her. As she freshened up in the surprisingly spacious bathroom, complete with high-end toiletries and a real towel instead of paper, Lin studied her reflection. She looked the same as yesterday. A 43-year-old kindergarten teacher with laugh lines around her eyes and a simple haircut she maintained herself. Yet somehow, overnight, the world had begun treating her differently. Breakfast arrived on fine china. Fresh pastries, fruit, and coffee that made her usual morning brew taste like dishwater by comparison. Lynn ate slowly, watching the French countryside emerge beneath scattered clouds. Paris. She was actually going to Paris, a dream she had mentioned to Hai years ago, but never seriously pursued. "Mrs. Zhao, a car will be waiting for you after we
land," the chief flight attendant informed her as they began their descent. "You won't need to worry about your luggage. It will be delivered to your hotel." "A car? But I thought I would just take the train into the city," Lynn said. The attendant
smiled politely. "Everything has been arranged, Mrs. Zhao." When the plane landed and taxied to the gate, Lynn expected to exit with the other passengers. Instead, she was asked to wait until everyone else had disembarked. Then, a new attendant appeared. A young woman who introduced herself as Elise, speaking in carefully practiced Mandarin. "Welcome to Paris, Mrs. Zhao. Please follow me. We'll bypass the regular customs line." Lynn followed Elise through a series of corridors and private security checkpoints, where her passport was examined with cursory glances rather than the thorough scrutiny she had expected. Within 20 minutes of landing, she found herself in the arrival hall where a tall man in a dark suit held a sign reading, "Mrs. Zhao." "This is Claude, your driver," Elise explained. "He will take you to your hotel. I hope you enjoy your stay in Paris, Mrs. Zhao." Outside, a gleaming black car waited at the curb. Claude opened the door with a small bow, and Lynn slipped into the back seat, feeling increasingly like she had wandered into someone else's life by mistake. As they drove through the morning traffic, Lynn watched Paris emerge around her. The elegant buildings, the tree-lined boulevards, the glimpses of landmarks she had only seen in photos. Despite her confusion about the circumstances, she couldn't help feeling a thrill. She was actually here in the city she had dreamed of visiting. "First time in Paris, madame?" Claude asked in accented English from the front seat. "Yes, it's my 15th wedding anniversary gift from my husband," Lynn replied, then added, "Though I'm starting to think there's something he hasn't told me." Claude smiled in the rearview mirror. "Paris is the perfect city for secrets to be revealed, madam." The car turned onto a grand avenue and then slowed before an imposing building with a uniformed doorman. Lynn read the name with widening eyes. Le Grand Hotel Royal. Even she, who knew little about luxury accommodations, recognized this as one of the most exclusive hotels in Paris. "There must be some mistake," she began, but Claude was already opening her door. "No mistake, madame, you are expected." The hotel lobby was like a palace with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and fresh flowers in massive arrangements. Lynn stepped inside hesitantly, conscious of her simple traveling clothes and small handbag among guests dressed in designer outfits. At the reception desk, the manager himself came forward to greet her. "Mrs. Zhao, welcome to Le Grand Hotel Royal. We are honored to have you with us. Your suite is ready." "Suite?" Lynn echoed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My husband only arranged the presidential suite as Mr. Zhao requested." The manager continued smoothly. "Please, allow me to escort you personally." Lynn followed in stunned silence as they entered a private elevator. The manager used a special key to access the top floor, chatting pleasantly about the hotel's history and amenities. Lynn barely heard him, her mind racing. Presidential suite? How could Hai afford this? What was happening? The elevator doors opened directly into a foyer, larger than their entire apartment in Shanghai. Beyond it stretched a suite of rooms that seemed to go on forever. A living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Eiffel Tower. A dining room that could seat 12. A bedroom with the largest bed Lynn had ever seen. "Your luggage has already been delivered," the manager said, indicating Lynn's modest suitcase which looked painfully out of place beside a marble-topped dresser. "The kitchen is fully stocked, but of course room service is available 24 hours. If you need anything at all, your personal butler Antoine is at your service." He gestured to a discreet uniformed man who had appeared silently in the doorway. Personal butler. Lin felt lightheaded. I don't need... Mr. Zhao was most insistent that you receive our finest service, the manager said. He called personally to confirm all arrangements. After they left, Lin stood alone in the vast suite, overwhelmed. She walked to the windows and gazed out at the Paris skyline, the Eiffel Tower standing proudly in the distance. This view alone probably cost more per night than she spent on groceries in a month. She tried calling Hai again, but still got no answer. Frustrated, she sent a text. What is going on? Presidential suite? Personal butler? How can we afford this? No reply came. Lin explored the suite further, discovering a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, a closet the size of their bedroom, at home, and a second bedroom she would never need. In the living room, she found a note on hotel stationery. Clothes have been arranged for you in the closet. Enjoy Paris today. We'll join you for dinner at 8 p.m. All my love, Hai. Curious, Lin returned to the massive closet. Opening the doors wider, she gasped. Inside hung at least 24 outfits, dresses, pants, blouses, coats, all in her size, all with designer labels she recognized from magazines. On shelves sat boxes containing shoes, handbags, and jewelry that gleamed even in the soft closet lighting. Lin backed away, closing the closet doors firmly. This was too much. None of it made sense. Her husband was a moderately successful businessman who took the bus to work and carefully reviewed their monthly budget. How could he possibly afford a first-class flight, a presidential suite, and a closet full of designer clothes? She sat on the edge of the enormous bed, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Either Hai had been lying to her for their entire marriage, or he had gone completely mad and spent their life savings on one extravagant trip. The gentle knock at the door startled her. Antoine the butler stood outside with a silver tray. Mrs. Zhao, a package has arrived for you from Mr. Zhao. On the tray sat a small blue velvet box with a note attached. Lin thanked Antoine and closed the door before opening the note. For your day in Paris, the car and driver remain at your disposal. I'll explain everything tonight. Inside the box lay an elegant watch that even Lin, with her limited knowledge of luxury goods, could tell was extraordinarily expensive. The brand name, subtle but recognizable, was one she had seen advertised by celebrities and royalty. Lin placed the watch back in its box without putting it on. She walked to the window again, watching the bustling city below. For 15 years, she had thought she knew her husband completely. They had built a life together based on simplicity, honesty, and modest means. Now, standing in a suite that cost more per night than their monthly rent, surrounded by luxury she had never asked for, Lin felt something unexpected. Not excitement or gratitude, but a deep, unsettling anger. Who was the man she had married? Why had he kept this part of his life hidden from her? What else didn't she know about Hai Zhao? Lin made a decision. She would not wait passively until dinner for answers. Returning to the closet, she selected the simplest outfit she could find, though even that bore a designer label, and prepared to explore Paris on her own terms. If Hai could arrange secret surprises, then she could make some plans of her own. Tante, she emerged from the bedroom. Antoine appeared immediately. Will you be going out, Mrs. Zhao? Shall I call the car? Yes, Lin said with newfound determination. And I'd like to make a stop before sightseeing. Is there a business center in the hotel where I can use a computer? Of course, Mrs. Zhao. Or I could bring a laptop to your suite if you prefer. The business center will be fine. I need to do some research. If Hai had been keeping secrets, they wouldn't remain hidden much longer. By the time they met for dinner, Lin intended to have some answers of her own. After 15 years of marriage, she deserved at least that much honesty. The business center of Le Grand Hotel Royal was empty when Lin entered, its polished wooden desks and leather chairs unoccupied in the late morning hours. A young staff member hurried over, eager to assist. May I help you with anything, Mrs. Zhao? He asked in careful English. I just need to use a computer for some research. Lynn replied, settling at a workstation in the corner where her screen wouldn't be visible to anyone entering. Once alone, Lynn typed her husband's name into the search engine. The results made her breath catch in her throat. Page after page of business news, financial reports, and photographs appeared. Hai Zhao, founder and CEO of Zhao Global Enterprises, listed among Asia's wealthiest business leaders. Articles described his transportation empire spanning 3 continents, his reputation as the ghost billionaire for his ability to amass extraordinary wealth while maintaining a low public profile. One photo showed Hai shaking hands with government officials at the opening of an international airport. Another captured him receiving a business leadership award, dressed in a tuxedo Lynn had never seen. The most recent article, dated just 2 weeks ago, announced his company's acquisition of a controlling stake in a European airline. Lynn's hands trembled as she scrolled through 15 years of a life she knew nothing about. How was this possible? How had she lived with this man, loved him, shared a home and a bed with him, without knowing who he truly was? She clicked on an image of their apartment building in Shanghai. According to the article, Hai owned not just their apartment but the entire building and several others throughout the city. The modest rent Lynn paid each month from her teaching salary went into an account that, according to another article, Hai donated entirely to education charities. By the time Lynn left the business center an hour later, her mind was reeling with facts and figures that seemed impossible to reconcile with the husband she thought she knew. Hai Zhao wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the richest men in Asia, with a net worth that included more zeros than Lynn could comfortably comprehend. Outside, the hotel's car waited as promised. Lynn gave the driver a simple instruction. "The Eiffel Tower, please." If she was going to process this shocking revelation, she might as well do it while seeing the landmark she had dreamed of visiting for so long. As the car moved through the Paris streets, Lynn stared out the window without really seeing the beautiful city around her. Her thoughts kept returning to small moments from their 15 years together. Hai carefully reviewing their monthly budget at the kitchen table. Hai taking the bus to work each day. Hai listening with genuine interest to her stories about kindergarten drama, never once hinting that he had spent his day making billion-dollar decisions. At the Eiffel Tower, Lynn declined the driver's offer to arrange a private tour. Instead, she joined the regular tourists, standing in line, buying a standard ticket, ascending in a crowded elevator. At the observation deck, she gazed out over Paris, its landmarks spread beneath her like toys. Somewhere in this beautiful city, her billionaire husband was preparing to meet her for dinner and finally tell her the truth, or at least some version of it. The anger that had fueled her research that morning was fading, replaced by a more complicated emotion. Why had he kept this from her? What had been the point of their simple life if it was all based on a lie? Lynn spent the afternoon wandering Paris in a daze. She walked along the Seine, visited Notre Dame, and sat in a small cafe watching Parisians go about their day. The city was everything she had imagined and more, yet she couldn't fully enjoy it with the weight of Hai's deception hanging over her. As evening approached, Lynn returned to the hotel to prepare for dinner. In the massive bathroom with its marble surfaces and gold fixtures, she soaked in the oversized tub, trying to gather her thoughts. How would she confront him? What would she say? After her bath, Lynn opened the closet again, this time with purpose. If Hai wanted to reveal his true self tonight, she would meet him as her true self. She selected not the most expensive dress, but the simplest one, a black cocktail dress that could have belonged in her real wardrobe back home if she'd had anywhere to wear such a thing. She applied minimal makeup and wore no jewelry except her plain wedding band. The expensive watch remained in its box. At precisely 7:45 p.m., a knock came at the suite door. Lynn's heart pounded as she opened it, expecting to see Hai. Instead, Antoine stood outside. "Mrs. Zhao, your car is ready whenever you wish to depart," he said. "My husband isn't coming to get me," Lynn asked, surprised. "Mr. Zhao asked that you be driven to the restaurant, madame. He will meet you there." The restaurant was atop another luxury hotel, with panoramic views of the Eiffel Tower, now lit up against the night sky. As Lynn was escorted inside, the maître greeted her by name. "Mrs. Zhao, welcome. Your husband is waiting for you." Lynn followed him through the elegant space where well-dressed diners enjoyed fine cuisine. At a private table by the window, Hai stood as she approached. He wore an expertly tailored suit that Lynn had never seen before. He looked like the billionaire businessman from the photos she had discovered, yet his eyes, nervous, loving, hopeful, were unmistakably those of the husband she knew. "Lynn," he said softly, coming around to pull out her chair. She sat without speaking, her practiced confrontation dying on her lips at the sight of him. Despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets, her heart still responded to his presence. Waiter appeared immediately with champagne. Hai dismissed him with a polite but firm gesture asking for privacy. When they were alone, Hai took a deep breath. "You must have questions." "Just one," Lynn replied, her voice steady despite her churning emotions. "Why? Why lie to me for 15 years? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" Hai's hands fidgeted with his napkin, a familiar, nervous gesture that seemed oddly out of place coming from a man who reportedly negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. "I didn't lie about who I am," he said finally. "I lied about what I own. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lynn challenged. "You let me believe we were an ordinary couple. You watched me count coins for groceries, worry about bills, take extra tutoring work to save for a new washing machine, all while you owned half of Shanghai." Hai winced at her words. "It wasn't supposed to be for so long," he said. "When we met at university, I was just starting my first business. I had some success, yes, but nothing like now. I didn't tell you at first because I wanted to be sure you loved me for myself, not my money." "And after? When weeks turned into months and months into years? When your small business became an empire?" Hai looked out at the glittering city, below. "The longer I waited, the harder it became to tell you. At first, I told myself I was protecting you, keeping you safe from people who might try to use you to get to my wealth. Then I convinced myself I was protecting us, preserving the authentic relationship we had built." He turned back to Lynn, his expression pained. "But the truth is I was afraid. Afraid that once you knew everything would change. Afraid you would look at me differently. Afraid the simple happiness we had found would be corrupted by wealth, and all that comes with it." Lynn absorbed his words, recognizing the truth in them despite her anger. "So what changed? Why tell me now, after 15 years? "Because I realized I was being selfish," Hai admitted. "Watching you at the airport, seeing you treated poorly by my own employee in my own airport. I suddenly saw what I had done. I hadn't been protecting you, I'd been denying you choices. The choice to decide for yourself how to handle wealth. The choice to use our resources to help others in ways you might have wanted." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. "And because I miss you, the real you, the whole you, I'm tired of dividing my life in two, of keeping secrets from the person I love most in the world." Lynn didn't reach for his hand. "The man I married took the bus to work and carefully checked prices at the market. The man sitting before me owns airlines and airports. Which one is the real you, Hai?" "Both," he said simply. "And neither. The man who loves you, who has always loved you, that's the real me. Everything else is just circumstance." Lynn looked down at her wedding ring, twisting it gently on her finger. 15 years, Hai. 15 years of not knowing who I was really married to." "You knew exactly who you were married to," Hai countered, his voice gentle but firm. "You knew my heart, my thoughts, my dreams. You knew the man who loves your dumplings and who snores when he sleeps on his back. You knew the man who still keeps the birthday cards you've given him in a box beside the bed. You knew me, Lynn. The only thing you didn't know was my bank balance." A tear slipped down Lynn's cheek. "And what happens now? Do we go back to our apartment and pretend none of this exists? Or do I become some billionaire's wife overnight, trading my classroom for charity galas?" "Neither," Hai said. What happens next is up to us, both of us, together. We can live wherever you want, however you want. You can continue teaching, if it makes you happy. We can use our resources to build better schools, create scholarships, make a difference in ways we choose together. He paused, watching her face carefully. All I ask is that you give us a chance to find out who we can be together, with no more secrets between us. Lynn finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. I need time, Hai. This is too much to process in one day. Of course, he said immediately. Take all the time you need. I've booked the suite for 2 weeks. You can stay, explore Paris, think about what you want. I can go back to Shanghai if you prefer to be alone. Lynn considered his offer, then shook her head slowly. No. If we're going to figure this out, we need to talk, really talk. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Relief washed over Hai's face. Thank you, he whispered. The waiter reappeared, asking if they were ready to order. Lynn surprised herself by saying, Not yet, but we will be. We just need a little more time. As they sat together in that elegant restaurant with Paris sparkling, below them, nothing was resolved, but something had shifted. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust broken is not quickly rebuilt. But for the first time in 15 years, they were both fully present, with no secret standing between them, and perhaps that was the greatest luxury of all.